Welcome back to this series. We're talking about the way to achieve optimum brain health and mental wellness. And today's a very important topic because it deals with our nutrition. And I call it prescription nutrition, a successful eating strategy for human thriving. This is the blood supply for the heart muscle. And when it is clogged, we get a heart attack. So here is a diagram outlining these major vessels. And when they become clogged, we can get angina, which is chest pain. We can get fatigue, shortness of breath. But this process of clogging these small vessels can happen in other areas like the brain. So when this happens in the brain, we may get a stroke, or over long periods of time, this circulation might be cutting off and killing parts of the brain, which might lead to dementia. The penis is also a very important area for men, and if you cut off a 1 millimeter artery, dorsal penile artery, it will result in erectile dysfunction. So this process can happen all over the body, and it's known as atherosclerosis. So this is what it looks like inside the vessels. And when we cut it open, when we look into the real human at this process, we find calcification and cholesterol deposits. Now, Eisenhower had a heart attack while he was president in 1955. So he assembled all the king's men and said, hey, this is 1955. We are advanced scientific nation. We should be able to figure this out. So he assembled these king's men, and what won was they concluded, since there was cholesterol there, that cholesterol or high fat was the culprit. And this is much like the logic that every time you see a crime scene, there's cops at the crime scene. So you falsely conclude that the cops caused the crime. Well, subsequently, over the years, we have learned that smoking causes this process, stress and anger cause this process, and we would have to define stress and we would have to define anger, but lack of sleep and inability to decompress, unwind. Obesity also causes this process. Lack of exercise, social isolation, very important in today's COVID world. Diet, including large portions and processed foods. So what do all of these things have in common? Because that's what we really are after in trying to prevent this, and that is inflammation. So inflammation is a process that can happen all throughout the body. The inflammatory response happens when you get a cut on your hand or arm, leg. And what happens is these immune cells, like this leukocyte here, attach and they go into the blood vessel, the endothelium. Now, there's swelling, there's certain signals in swelling and clotting factors. And this is good so that you don't bleed out. But this can also be activated in the endothelial cells on the inside of the blood vessels that service different areas, different muscles, the heart muscle, the brain, like we just talked about. Now, this is this cascade. The immune system is this intricate cascade of events and signals. In fact, in development, it is developed off the neural crest, which is just like the nervous system, the central and autonomic and peripheral nervous system that develops embryologically. And just like the nervous system, it has messengers that talk to cells. And so one of the main components that we're talking about is macrophages that secrete IL-6 and lymphocytes that secrete CRP that go or secrete IL-6 that goes to the liver and secretes CRP, C-reactive protein, from the liver. And then there's this cascade of signals that basically just cause inflammation. So let's look at causes for inflammation that come from the standard American diet. What do you see about this diet? You see a lot of processed food. I see fried food, highly refined oils and carbohydrates. I see a lack of greens, of vegetables. And so if we want to avoid this, what is the best diet to do that? How do we do that? I don't want this, so what do? Do I do the low fat, like a vegan diet, vegetarian? This would be in the Pritikin camp, or the Esselstyn camp, or the Caldwell, Furman, or Dean Ornish even. And the answer is yes, because high omega-6 fats cause inflammation. When they're disproportionate to omega-3, they cause inflammation. So they will cause this process. Or should I do the low sugar like ketogenic diet, Mediterranean diet? And the answer is yes, you should, because sugary foods cause insulin resistance, which causes inflammation. And also high rise in insulin also causes fat deposition, which causes obesity, which causes clotting factors, which causes that cascade of response of the IL-6, CRP, inflammation response. So if we switch from that standard American diet to a vegan diet that looks like this, probably things will improve, less inflammation, okay? But if a vegan diet is not a nutrition strategy. It is just saying, I'm going to eliminate all sources of food that come from an animal. Well, there are good sources that come from an animal, and there are sources that cause inflammation. So I will explain. But first, I just want to do a thought experiment. If we ate from just this palette, and we focused on that watermelon, those grapes, that banana, some tropical fruits, we could spike insulin, we could get insulin resistance, we could get diabetes. I have had this in my practice where I have someone post-heart attack, they go on Pritikin diet, they eat Jamba Juice 3 meals a day, which is on the Pritikin diet, and they get diabetes. They get insulin resistance and diabetes and inflammation, and they have a reoccurrence of their heart illness. This is the complaint that has come back to haunt Dean Ornish. And I can talk further about that later, but at no point in our history did we come across all this ripened, high sugar, readily plentiful fruit. It was, well, maybe in the Garden of Eden, but outside of that, the grocery store is not a true representation of the intended diet that we have. In fact, this is a vegan diet. Technically, this satisfies the definition of a vegan diet. There's no animal products in any of these things, but if you ate this, your health, your thriving would be horrible. Your inflammation would be high, I guarantee it. Now, this is sugarcane. This is a refined, highly refined product. So if you nod on that reed in the back, you probably do okay. If you take in this poison in this jar, you're going to have inflammation. You're not going to do well. Now, along comes a ketogenic diet, and it eliminates what I just showed you, that refined sugar or refined starches, the carbohydrates. And there's even a way built in to monitor it, because the standard definition of a ketogenic diet is 75% of your calories are by fat, 20% of your calories are by protein, and 5% of your calories are from complex carbohydrates, usually through vegetables. Now, I can also monitor your compliance. I can tell if you're being compliant with this diet by monitoring ketones, which are produced in the absence of carbohydrates in your diet. So things like oxybutyrone acetate and acetoacetate and acetate. I can monitor for those either through saliva, through blood, through urine. So it's an improvement because it takes care of one aspect of inflammation. But if I just focus on certain sources of proteins, I'm going to get disordered fats. Let me show you what I mean. If I don't pay any attention to omega-6, omega-3 ratio and just go after pork, well, pork is a 16-to-1 ratio of omega-6 to omega-3, okay? And an anti-inflammatory food is 4-to-1 or less. So I should be focused on the 4-to-1. Overall in my diet, I should have 4-to-1 omega-6 to omega-3 or less. And so if I eat pork, I'm not going to make it. If I eat corn-fed, corn-raised, corn-finished beef, it's 12-to-1. If I eat grass-fed, grass-raised, Big Island beef, it's 8-to-1. Bison, 6-to-1. Lamb, now lamb. Lamb starts with the anti-inflammatory food. So even some lamb from New Zealand is 1-to-1, but most lamb will fall between 4-to-1 and 1-to-1. And salmon, wild salmon. Wild salmon is the best food that God made. Meal, it's a complete, it has everything you need, 9 essential amino acids, the 2 essential fatty acids, and every micronutrient that you need. It is the perfect food, and it is an animal. So for all the vegan people that say veganism, no, salmonism. That's a nutrition strategy. But it's a 1-to-12 ratio. It's gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous. However, if you eat farmed salmon, it's a frankenfood. Why? Because they feed the salmon even in the locks up in, the farm fjords up in Norway, the Norwegian farmed salmon, they still feed it soy meal. Now, soy meal is a frankenfood to the farmed to salmon. And so what happens? They grow out omega-6. So this is similar to eating bacon. So this has a 12-to-1. It's like beef. It's somewhere between beef and bacon. The wild is absolutely great. It has a great ratio of omega-3 to omega-6. It's also lower in calories, and it's all kinds of great things. So you can eat wild salmon. Now along comes the Mediterranean diet. Far and away, the medical literature supports a Mediterranean diet if you want to live into your hundreds, if you want to avoid heart attack, dementia, cancer, obesity, stroke, erectile dysfunction. If you want to avoid all of these things, eat Mediterranean diet. Well, let's look at why it overlaps both of those bridges, the ketogenic diet and the low-fat diet, because it sources its meats that have a good omega-3, omega-6 ratio, like trout and lamb and pasture-raised eggs. And it also is heavy in vegetables. So you can see on the base, the majority of it is vegetables, okay? And it avoids all the refined foods, the sugar, the things that spike the insulin, okay? Now, a word about eggs, because all eggs are not created the same. The USDA will certify eggs with different categories. You have your traditional, then you have your cage-free, your free-range, and your pasture-raised. Please only buy pasture-raised eggs. Why? Because the first case, traditional, they clip their beaks, they keep them in these cages, they're in the cages all the time, so they're stressed. If you look at the yolks, well, let's do that. Let's look at the comparison, but real quick, they clip the beaks. In the cage-free, not much different. They can walk around. Free-range, there has to be a door that they can access for 6 hours a day in order to legally call it free-range. It doesn't mean that the chickens can find the door or know where the door is. It just means that there is one. Now, pasture-raised, they cannot clip the beak by definition, so they eat the natural grubs, seeds, and grasses, And guess what happens to the yolks? So you have conventional raised eggs. They look the exact same, but they're 16-1. You have cage-free, a little better, 12-1. Free range, even omega-3 is 8-1. They feed it flax seed. What about pasture-raised? Well, guess what? It's an anti-inflammatory food. Go figure. You feed the chickens the food that God made for them, and then they grow out a food that we can eat that doesn't harm us with inflammation. Maybe actually there is something to this God design, God creation bit. So this is a pasture-raised chicken. They get exercise, there's no clipped beaks, they have their diet is grub, seeds, grass. It's designed by our Creator this way. Beautiful. Now, a word about processed things. Processed oils are poison. They cause inflammation. So don't eat soybean oil, any of the safflower oil, or all of the processed oils. Vegetable oil, they're cheap, but they're poison. So you're eating poison. Anytime you go to a restaurant, all of them buy these in massive quantities from Cisco, and that's what they cook your food with. So you're paying to be poisoned. It makes no sense. So the grain in the back, if you gleaned the grains, remember when the disciples were coming through and the Pharisees were all upset about them gleaning some grain on Sabbath. They were rolling the wheat berries and then eating some of those berries in the back. Well, those actually in small supply, won't cause inflammation in most people. Now, if you process it, it becomes a highly processed food that spikes insulin and causes inflammation. So, can we do better? Can we combine all of this? Yes, we can. We can combine it in what I call a Mediterranean diet, which is a whole food, plant-rich, low carbohydrate, meaning no flour, no sugar. High good fat, meaning high omega-3s, and low bad fat, meaning low omega-6s. So it looks like this. You replace those grains and fruit with low carbohydrate vegetables. And it's very vegetable rich, plant rich, right? So that's the base of the pyramid. And then you have olives and seeds and nuts that are supplying all your great fats. And then you have these good sources of protein, and then minimize any of the processed foods. Now, breakfast can look like that, lunch can look like that, and dinner could look like that. And the first thing someone tells me is, I cannot afford to buy that. I cannot afford to eat like that or feed my family of 6 that food. I'm going to show you how you can. There's no more excuses. So everyone in Hawaii has a Costco membership. Everything that I'm about to show you is from Costco. These are organic, pasture-raised eggs, Kirkland brand. So they're not processed. They're 4-to-1 fat ratio. This would fit into our nutrition strategy for optimum brain functioning and longevity. These are flash frozen or flash vine ripened canned vegetables. They're a great substitute, oftentimes have better quality phytonutrients than the fresh ones in the market, because those are picked ahead of time and ripened on their way to market. These are picked at their peak, and the processing does not diminish their nutrition capacity. This is not processed. It's in a beautiful fat ratio. It's frozen wild sockeye salmon and cans of wild sockeye salmon. And here's prices on these things. So per person, per serving, these are all from Costco. This is $2.35 per serving, $1.65. That's cheaper than a burger at McDonald's. $1.29 and $2.28. These are very affordable prices. Now, This is the exception to farm-raised fish, tilapia loins. It's a 1-to-1 ratio. So even the farmed is okay on that. This is beautiful lamb, not processed, 4-to-1 fat ratio. Beautiful sardines, not processed, 1-to-12, mildly processed olives with all their polyunsaturated fatty acids, beautiful nutrition, I love it. These are the only exception to highly processed. So they're good fats, and they have polyunsaturated fatty acids in them. Now, avocado oil has a high smoke point, so you can cook with that one. Olive oil should go on the salad. So one for salads, one for cooking. These are also found at Costco. Diced tomatoes, not processed, no fat. Not processed avocados for cheap, avocado chunks, and even nuts with polyunsaturated fatty acids, and the medium chain triglycerides with the macadamia nuts. There is a case of post-heart disease that you want to have about 4 or 5 nuts of the macadamia nuts with that, but that is a specific particular. Now, this is fresh produce, not processed, no fat. It's great. Some people got on the kick that you can't cook vegetables. That's ridiculous. In fact, some of the lycopenes come out of tomatoes after you cook them. So the whole raw myth is just a myth. It's not optimal nutrition. So this is highly processed, right? So this is hummus. This is about the least I would go for processed foods. If you're not going to go through the McDonald's, if you're going to get this and that's going to save you from going through the drive-thru at McDonald's, okay, by all means, use this with some carrots and celery or bell peppers. But it is a processed food, and it's highly rich in calories. This is another processed convenience fast food. It's not great, but if it saves you from McDonald's or Burger King, okay. In a pinch, Carl's Jr., this chicken tortilla soup or Tuscan bean, it's convenient. If you're not going to Popeyes, great. Now, this is about as low as it goes. Okay, I guess. It's highly processed, but I'm not gonna have a happy smile on my face if I see you eating this, but it would work. Now, what have I talked about the most? Nutrition or diet? Nutrition, because that's about 95% of the issue with our sedentary lifestyles. So the majority of our calorie expenditure is just maintaining our body. And exercise, while extremely important, it's like medicine, we should do it every single day. We should do a HIIT workout, which is just 30 to 60 seconds of 110% effort with 10 to 30 seconds of recovery effort. And this is a full body, multiple joint workout, 6 days per week for 30 minutes. Now, we absolutely should do this type of workout. This is the most efficient workout, but the majority of our focus should go into our nutrition. Why? Because I can show you someone who exercises 6 hours a day, but then out-eats their exercise, but I can never show you someone, unless they have a disease state like hypothyroidism or something, but I can never show you someone who eats the perfect amount and eats the diet that I just showed you and doesn't work out a bit, but is overweight. So this has to do with the way that we metabolize in our sedentary lifestyle, the fact that we mainly sit at a desk for the majority of our day. But if we could encapsulate exercise as a medicine, we would be billionaires, whoever did that. It would be the biggest blockbuster medication ever known to man. It would be a literal miracle cure. So exercise is very important, but focus 95% of your effort into what goes in your mouth. And I can go further into that in the discussion and question period. So here's something from 1 Timothy. Physical exercise has some value, but Godliness is valuable in every way. It holds promise for the present life and for the life to come. This saying is trustworthy and deserves full acceptance by you. In fact, this is why we work hard and struggle, because we have set our hope on the living God, who is the Savior of all people, especially of believers. Now, I work with people and see the changes in diet and exercise, and it's miraculous. But there's something better. And I want to remind you that as good as diet and exercise is, Jesus is so much better, so much sweeter, and so much more restoring to your health. I love you all, and I hope that you take this to heart and bring it from your head into your heart, live it out, and live the best mental wellness and best mental health you can do.